Hey, Run Elite. Did you know that 78% of collegiate athletes across all sports, if you just pool them together, they use creatine? That's what the research shows here. But we want to take a little bit of comfort in the amount of research that's been done. In fact, there's over 1,000 research papers on the use of creatine, and it's the most widely used sports supplement worldwide since 1900. So, today, we're going to be talking about creatine's use for distance runners. We kind of know that the guys in the gym who are trying to pump the iron and get really jacked, they're often using creatine, but do runners use it? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. We're going to talk about the use cases that you have and see if it works for you. Let's go. Now, those of you who have read the Run Elite book, if we turn to page 106, we can see a chart that's in here on the 3 different metabolic systems. But a quick summary for you is that we have an aerobic system, we have an anaerobic system, and then we have something called the phosphocreatine, ATP phosphocreatine system. Now, that's where ATP and phosphocreatine, the words are right in there, comes into play. So as a runner, if you're running for a long time, hours, or even like multiple minutes, you're gonna be mostly using your aerobic system. Now, if you run sprints somewhere in like the 100 meters to 400 meters or even 800 meters, you're using your aerobic system, but you're also using the anaerobic system. So what's this third energy system? We can call it the immediate energy system, also known as the ATP phosphocreatine system. Now, this is a system that's really special. It uses the stored ATP that you've already made in your body, and it's in your muscle cells, and you can use it up at a moment's notice. And you can really go all out for about 8 seconds before your anaerobic system needs to kick in. That's why if you are watching this video, if you just stand up and you just go run to the end of the driveway and get the mail and back as fast as you can, your heart rate might not even go up. You don't need to produce that much energy because you already have that energy inside. So that's the phosphocreatine system. Now, when you use up that ATP, you have to make more. And so we're limited by how quickly we can re-uptake and remake ATP. And in order to do that, we need something that's called creatine. Now, this isn't gonna impact your race almost whatsoever if you're running, let's say, a marathon, because you're not using that energy system. But there are use cases where you can use this energy system in your training, and you can train better for your marathon through the use of this system. Now, creatine is naturally forming in our bodies, but it's naturally forming in other people's bodies too, including maybe the animals that we sometimes eat. So how much creatine do you really need just to have a functioning body? We need about 2 grams per day to restore the creatine that we use up in our body. And you can get it from a couple different places. You can either get it because you ate it, or you can get it because your body will make it. But our bodies do make all the creatine that we need, and so therefore it's classified as a non-essential nutrient. You don't need to take it in, your body will make it. So what does supplementing with additional creatine do? All right, now here is where I'm gonna get a little bit polarizing, but stick with me here because I'm gonna explain this to you. I'm gonna put all the research on the screen for you. Now, you can look at people who eat a meat-based diet or a plant-based diet, and you can look at the creatine that they have in their bodies. You can measure this, and you're actually gonna find that those who eat a plant-based diet have lower stored creatine in their bodies. But what does that actually mean for your performance? Does that translate to better or worse or no difference in your performance? Here we go. The stored creatine in someone who has a plant-based diet is actually lower, but it doesn't affect their athletic performance. And in response to this observation, it was hypothesized that if someone who is on a plant-based diet took additional creatine, they'd get their creatine to the levels of a meat eater and they would have an increase in performance. And that's what they studied. But the research didn't show any difference between the 2 groups. But the research does show that either group, when they supplement with creatine, their performance did increase. So it seems that it doesn't matter which kind of diet you eat. If you take a creatine supplement, it will improve short-term performance, but only for a certain kind of performance.
That's what she said.
According to the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition, creatine is the most effective ergogenic supplement in terms of increasing, here it is, high intensity capacity during training, and predominantly in powerlifting and in sprinting. So why would it say that just powerlifting and sprinting benefits from creatine? Well, let's just pause and think for a second here. In order to run, we need to make ATP, and we're gonna use it for energy. And indeed, the most important use of creatine in the body is to make more ATP, but it does it through that really rapid metabolic pathway. And the thing is with running is that we're not running at intensities that are high enough to use that pathway. So we don't need the creatine to make more ATP because we can use our aerobic and our anaerobic system. So we need to understand creatine a little bit more in the short distances before we can understand it in the long distances. So I'm gonna take you through this here. Over a series of 22 different studies, there were 721 participants who took creatine, and they got an increase in their lean muscle mass. And they got it by a pretty large amount, 1.37 kilograms of additional lean tissue after various different strength training protocols. And they did this within 1 week to 1 year, so quite a big range. But by taking creatine, they were able to get more lean tissue and get those gains. So it seems like creatine helps to build lean muscle, but hold on, not so fast. Much of that muscle mass might just be from actual water weight. So we actually, for a long time, didn't know if the increased mass that powerlifters were getting was from more muscle mass or just more water that's stored in those muscles. They did get bigger, but did they get more muscle? So instead of looking at just muscle size, researchers then pivoted and they looked at muscle strength. And independent of size, muscle strength actually did improve. And the way that it did this is that creatine supplementation delayed muscle fatigue under high intensity exercise, allowing for a greater volume of exercise to be done during training. And that's really where we start to talk about distance runners maybe using creatine. So we've already established that if you're not trying to put on more bulk, and you're probably not as a long distance runner, you probably don't want that much more muscle, but you certainly don't just want more stored water weight. It's extra weight to carry. And it doesn't really help in your aerobic metabolism. So it does help in short repeated efforts. And what do distance runners do that are short repeated efforts? Well, we do intervals, don't we? So that sounds a little bit juicy, like you want to go out and do some repeated hard efforts, and you might want to. We're going to come back and finish with that, but there's a use case for creatine that's even better for a distance runner, and that is with your recovery. Now, after a hard effort, or even just a really long run, your muscles, they use up glycogen. It's that stored sugar that we keep in our muscles and in our liver. And if you've ever run a marathon and you've hit the wall, it's because you've run really low on glycogen. So when you do a hard effort or a long run, when you come back, one of the things that's gonna determine how quickly you recover is how quickly you can get glycogen back into the muscles. And wouldn't you know it, creatine does help facilitate the resynthesis of glycogen after a run. So it does help with recovery. Here's some research for you. Roberts here, they took 14 cyclists and they had them ride at about 70% of their VO2 max. So it's a pretty good effort, but it's certainly not a sprint. And they rode until exhaustion, completely spent. And then they had them consume a high carbohydrate diet with and without a creatine supplement. And they were using about 20 grams per day, which is quite high. And the group who supplemented with creatine, they increased the glycogen content in their muscles compared with the group who used a placebo in just the 24 hours after their hard workout. But that's just the research on recovering from one workout. What if you're doing multiple workouts in a week? Now, research that was published in the Clinical Science Journal in 2022, they found an increase in glycogen storage after 5 days of using creatine. Now it gets even better because we can get more specific. There was a group of cyclists that they did a time trial over 120 kilometers. It's pretty long, but they did something different this time. They had them put in a series of 1 kilometer sprints in the middle of this time trial. And those who supplemented with creatine had an increase in power output during those 1 kilometer sprints. But they didn't have an increase in sprint time in the earliest of those 1 kilometer sprints. But they did later and later into the race. So the research on this in endurance athletes seems to show that if you're going for a long time and you're inputting surges, so if you're a runner, this might be hitting an uphill in a race or surging past a competitor, or maybe your kick at the end of a race. When you're tired and you've already maxed out a lot of your metabolic systems, and now you're going to do something high intensity, that creatine supplementation does increase your ability to do that. And so for elite runners, this actually does make a lot of sense. What do we see in elite marathons? They might be running in a pack, and then there's a breakaway. And then the pack has to reel them in, and then there's a battle going back and forth. And maybe somebody makes a gutsy move, and they pick up the pace for a kilometer or two, and then they fade off, and then they pick it up again. And they have these repeated efforts of surging, because this is tactically something an elite runner might do. And in that case, creatine is likely to help. If you're going to run your marathon at an even pace the entire way, it's not going to help you that much. But go back to your training. In your training, if you're going to do repeated efforts, let's say 100 meter or 200 meter fast intervals on a track, and you supplement with creatine, you're going to be able to recover from that workout faster, and you're going to be able to perform more of those intervals in your training. So it doesn't help your race if you're even paced, but it does help you anytime, be it in training or a race where you're going to do a repeated effort at high intensity. Now, that whole thing about taking creatine with a high carbohydrate diet is really important. If you just take the creatine, but you're eating a high fat or a high protein or nothing at all, it's not going to work nearly as well as if you combine your creatine supplementation with a high carbohydrate meal. We've made a lot of progress here, but let's look at another piece of study that really corroborates everything that we just said right here. Now, there was a really great study that was done in the International Journal of Sports Medicine. Now, the researchers had cyclists do something that was very specific. They had them go for a steady state for 30 minutes. And then they had them increase the pace to above a race pace. And then they had them do a bunch of short sprints. And then they came back to a steady state and they did that until they were exhausted. So this is a very involved piece of research that was done. Now, what they found was that the creatine supplementation didn't make that much of a difference in the overall finish time, but it did make a difference in how fast they were able to do the sprints in the middle of the time trial. So once again, it brings us back to the idea that if you find that you're going to be needing to do repeated hard efforts in your race, then creatine might help you if you couple it with a high carbohydrate diet. When it comes to getting your best training in and really peaking for your best race, you have to recover from these bigger workouts, these long runs. Now, nothing is going to help your recovery more than proper nutrition and proper sleep. The easiest, simplest way is to get a sleep mask. Sleep masks are super useful, but you got to get a good one. So I've got 4 sleep masks myself, and I found this brand called Manta Sleep, and they're really the best I've ever used. My channel is called Run Elite because I want to give you the best tips to make you as elite as you can be. So if you want to get better sleep, there's a lot of things that you can do, but let's take first steps first and maximize the sleep that you're already getting. And I want you to pick up one of these. Pick up any sleep mask that you like, skip over all the ones that aren't that good, and just get one that's really good, and then you'll have it for the rest of your life. So go to mantasleep.com and then put in code RUNELITE and you'll save 10%. It's pretty awesome. Back to the video. Now, creatine has some side effects as well, but those side effects can actually be really good. Let's look at the side effects of creatine. One of them is that you're likely to retain some extra water weight. Now, you probably don't want this if you're an endurance runner, but I don't know. It's up to you. Maybe you do. If you're going to be running where it's really hot and you want to have that extra water in your body, maybe. But however you slice it, it's going to be extra weight that you're likely to carry. You may get a little bit of a performance gain, but you also might get a little bit of extra weight gain. So I don't know. You got to decide if that's worth it for you. But there is another side effect. We got to look at mice studies to start this off. It's been done in humans too, but this is where it was discovered. When tested in mice, one of the side effects of using creatine was to delay muscular atrophy as they got older. So muscle atrophy is just when your muscles start to wither away because you're shrinking and getting old and maybe heading towards, just being an old person. And creatine has a way to stave that off. It's called sarcopenia. Sarcopenia is the muscle loss that we tend to see as a result of aging. And there's a couple things that you can do. You can lift weights and power train, but if you take creatine and do power training when you're in your older years, so over 40, certainly over 50, and definitely over 60 or beyond, strength training with creatine will minimize sarcopenia. And guess what? Loss of muscle mass is going to be something that really degrades your performance in your later years, of course. And that extra muscle mass that you can carry over later into your life has been shown, at least in mice and also in humans, but it started with mice, that the average lifespan of mice who were fed creatine lived 9% longer. So how much creatine should you take? Some of this research was using 20 grams, and that's an absurd amount. Please don't take that much creatine. It's a lot. How much do you want? Well, the answer is that you want to take the least amount possible, and not even because more creatine would hurt you, but it's the stuff that's in creatine. One of the problems with creatine isn't actually the creatine itself if you took too much, but it's what else is in the creatine. And there's maybe a lot of contamination in creatine. According to Butts, creatine's not even regulated by the FDA, and it may contain contamination. And so if you take a large sample of creatine supplements on the market and you test them, 50% of the analyzed products on the market, they exceeded the maximum levels recommended by the EFSA for at least one contaminant.
But wait! There's more!
There's another side effect to creatine, but it's a good side effect. So listen up here, because there's a little bit of subtlety to this if you want to get the benefit. Now, there's an amino acid in the body that's called methionine, and methionine gets broken down into homocysteine, and then homocysteine further gets broken down into cysteine. You don't really need to know that, but just know that there's a process in your body that produces something called homocysteine, and higher levels of homocysteine, especially later in life, they're really highly correlated to things like stroke, heart attack, and damage to the walls of the artery. Now, creatine can actually help you lower homocysteine levels. Now, that might be one of the reasons why it can extend a lifespan, but it can only do this if it's also coupled with the presence of B vitamins, particularly vitamin B6, vitamin B12, and folate. But the most important one is vitamin B12. We've gone over a number of things that creatine can be used for here. From interval training to surges that you might do in a race, to extending lifespan through the reduction of homocysteine or through the maintenance of your muscle mass and fighting sarcopenia. So these are a lot of benefits, and there seems to be very little downside as long as you don't have too much creatine. And the reason you don't want too much isn't because the creatine itself can hurt you necessarily, but because the contaminants in the creatine. So how much should you take? According to the European Food and Safety Authority, if you take 3 grams of creatine per day, you're at very low risk of contamination. Now, if you take up to the 20, sometimes done in research studies, you're at a very high risk. So we know that 3 grams is appropriate, and a lot of the research shows that 3 to 5 grams of creatine per day will give you all of the upside that we're looking for sarcopenia, homocysteine, and endurance performance, and short athletic performance as well. You get all that benefit with a low risk of contamination at 3 to 5 grams per day. Okay, now I'm gonna share with you how to dose your creatine and perhaps where you might wanna get it. When we look at dosing creatine, you get the benefits of taking creatine if you accumulate it in your body. So if you just take it one time, it'll have a pretty minimal effect. You want to increase the saturation of creatine in your body. And so you can do this by taking creatine for about 12 weeks. If you do that, you achieve a saturation in your body and you'll get the benefits. But then you can help yourself out by minimizing the toxicity potential by getting off the creatine for another 12 weeks after that. If you do that, you're going to retain the benefits, but you're going to get rid of the toxicity level. So you cut your risk of contamination in half. So I recommend that if you're a serious bodybuilder and you're wanting to really lean into this, you might want to use a different protocol. But for a runner, you can cycle on creatine for about 3 months and then get off of it for about 3 months. A good way to do this is if you have a race coming up, you can get on creatine during your training, but then you want to get off of the creatine a couple of weeks before your race. Now, you're going to retain the benefits of the creatine that you took, but you're going to get rid of some of that extra water weight, which is one of the main downsides of why we wouldn't want to take it. So cycle off starting a couple of weeks before your race. And then when you're done with your race, you can get back on it again and you can cycle on and off. Now, what kind of creatine supplement might you want to take? Well, I actually take 2 different ones and I'm going to share with you the use case for each one. The first one that I did was that I went on Amazon and I just got a bag of creatine. And now each serving of this is 5 grams. So I would take a 5-gram serving every day. Or you can take creatine gummies. Now, the reason I take creatine gummies is because I don't necessarily carry the powder around with me when I'm going to the gym, when I'm traveling. It stays at my house, and if I remember, I put it into a smoothie. But oftentimes I don't remember, so I'll take the creatine gummy. Now, each of these gummies has 3 grams of creatine, so I'll take 1 or 2 gummies. And by the way, they taste freaking delicious. I've only tried this flavor. This one's orange, and it's so good. I just kind of look forward to taking them. Like when I took Flintstones vitamins when I was a kid and they just tasted so good. These taste really good. But they also have carbohydrate with them. So it's like the total package that you need. Now you might want to take a B12 supplement as well, but I suggest you just take that when you're at your house. And if you have that in your body, you'll be fine. So I hope that you found something useful in this video here. We've gone over creatine, what the use cases are in different sports, how you can use them for endurance performance, how you can potentially extend your life and your muscle mass later into life, and you can lower homocysteine. I've shared with you how you can minimize the possibility of contamination and how you can go even further with that by cycling on and cycling off. There's 2 different kinds of products that I use. I use both a powder and I use the gums. I like the gums way better. They taste way better. They're fun. They have the sugar in them as well. They're portable. You don't need a shaker or anything like that. You can just take them to the gym with you and take them there. You can try yours for free with the code below. This has been Andrew Snow with Run Elite. I'll see you on our next video. Thank you so much.
Now, if you liked that video, if you learned something from it, then please give it a like, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment. It really does help support a channel like this. And news for you, if you liked the Run Elite Train and Think Like the Greatest Runners of All Time book that you may have got on Amazon, a lot of you have, thank you so much. There's another book, my second book. It's on nutrition, what you can eat to directly improve your athletic performance, and what you can eat that will definitely impede your athletic performance. There's a ridiculous amount of research on this. It'll be out later this year in 2025. If you'd like to join the waitlist and get special bonuses, like a live Q&A with me for anybody who purchases the book early, and it's still many months away, go ahead and get on the waitlist here, and you'll automatically just receive an invitation from me. When the book is about to launch, you can get it at a reduced price, and you'll be able to get a video Q&A live with me after you've read the book. It's really going to be a sweet bonus for you. I'm looking forward to this book. I know you will too. I'll see you on the next video. This has been Andrew Snow.